A person familiar with Rob Reiner's circle has shared that the legendary director and actor, along with his wife, were discovered lifeless at their Brentwood, California residence. The unexpected nature of the loss sent waves of disbelief through the entertainment world, while a remark Reiner once made long ignored has resurfaced, drawing intense attention and sparking questions that refuse to fade. What truly unfolded behind the scenes? Did he sense the direction his life was taking? By this morning, a wave of curiosity has emerged around the sudden passing of the couple, prompting reflection rather than conclusions. Leave a 1 in the comments if you feel a sense of empathy for Rob Reiner, or a 0 if you hold a different perspective. If you're interested in thoughtful exploration of the unanswered layers surrounding this story, remember to like, subscribe, and enable notifications so you don't miss the next in-depth discussion. The news unsettled many last night as reports circulated that authorities were examining an unexpected situation involving legendary filmmaker Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle, at their Brentwood home. The sudden uncertainty sparked widespread discussion and concern across the film community, prompting reflection rather than certainty. For decades, Rob Reiner has stood as a defining presence in cinema not only for his creative vision, but for the lasting cultural influence of films that have shaped generations and continue to be admired around the world. The loss of Rob Reiner and his wife has deeply affected not only colleagues within the industry, but also audiences around the world who grew up with his work. As the film community processes this heartbreaking moment, many unanswered questions continue to surface, while authorities carefully work to clarify the circumstances. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, together with members of the Reiner family, acknowledged the passing of both Rob and his wife, offering words of sympathy and honoring a legacy that holds lasting meaning for cinema and for countless admirers. Voices from across the film world have echoed a shared sense of grief over the sudden absence of such an influential creative force. This is a deeply painful moment, not only for Rob's loved ones, but for everyone who values the spirit of cinema, Mayor Bass expressed. Rob Reiner was more than a familiar name in Hollywood. He represented imagination and artistic courage, consistently expanding how stories could be told on screen. His departure marks a profound moment of loss, leaving a space that cannot easily be filled. According to trusted accounts, Reiner and his wife were involved in a deeply troubling incident at their Los Angeles home on Sunday afternoon. The news stirred widespread unease, revealing a side of Rob's life few had ever glimpsed beneath the polished surface of public acclaim. While he was widely seen as an emblem of achievement, those close to him suggest he carried unresolved tensions and the weight of immense responsibility. Behind influence and recognition, Rob navigated a quiet landscape of pressure and solitude that remained largely unseen by the outside world. These are the lesser-seen layers of Rob Reiner's life that only drew attention after a turning point brought renewed reflection. Long-standing compromises, difficult choices, and private struggles gradually surfaced, reshaping a story once viewed as flawless. What appeared to be a life defined solely by achievement now reveals subtle fractures few ever noticed. This video revisits his entire journey through an unfamiliar lens, offering deeper insight into the pressures, expectations, and inner weight that shaped Rob's path over decades. The obstacles he faced extended beyond his career, reaching into deeply personal struggles and difficult decisions that gradually became part of his larger life narrative. Information that surfaced in the early hours of the morning brought Hollywood to a sudden pause, leaving the film world reflective and unsettled. Reports confirmed the unexpected passing of Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle Singer, at their Los Angeles residence, marking a moment of profound loss. The news resonated far beyond the industry itself, touching countless admirers around the world who had long respected their presence and legacy. Their passing represents a profound loss, not only for family and close friends, but for a film world already navigating a period of transition and searching for new voices to guide its future. Turning to the heart of the unfolding story, reports indicate that investigators are examining developments involving a close family member following the couple's sudden deaths at their home over the weekend. Authorities have described the incident as severe and deeply unsettling, without releasing definitive conclusions. The case has stirred intense attention, resonating across the film community and capturing the concern of the wider public alike. While many aspects of the incident remain unclear, the fact that it unfolded within a place long associated with safety and familiarity has heightened public concern. Authorities have stated that they are carefully reviewing the circumstances, emphasizing caution and patience as the picture continues to evolve. An official media update later acknowledged the family's confirmation of the loss, a moment that left many stunned and reflective, underscoring how quickly certainty can give way to unanswered questions. State leaders also acknowledged the news, expressing deep sorrow over the loss of a figure long associated with Hollywood's cultural landscape. In his remarks, Governor Gavin Newsom emphasized the sensitive nature of the situation, noting that the events unfolded in a deeply private setting rather than a public space, which adds layers of complexity to how the situation is understood. The fact that everything occurred within a long-time family environment has prompted broader reflection on unseen dynamics behind closed doors. In early briefings, officials clarified that the circumstances were unusual and required careful examination, reinforcing the seriousness with which the matter is being approached. The situation has been identified as involving potential criminal aspects and has officially moved into a formal investigation. Because of Rob Reiner's prominence, each action taken by authorities has drawn immediate public attention from the very beginning. Early assessments suggested the timeline was recent, allowing investigators to narrow their focus to a short window of events. Initial findings avoided explicit conclusions, noting the absence of certain indicators, while pointing to subtle physical signs that raised concern and prompted officials to treat the circumstances as serious and non-accidental. Field assessments at the scene reported no immediate indications of external substances. While the official cause has not yet been made public, the medical examination remains a key part of the process and is expected to provide clearer answers within the coming days. The surrounding area was promptly secured, with access carefully limited as authorities asked for space and patience. A spokesperson for the investigative team emphasized that standard protocols are being followed and that details will be shared only when the time is appropriate. This short update captures a moment still surrounded by verification, with no conclusions ready to be drawn at any level. As the location was secured, attention naturally shifted to those closest to the couple, each facing a difficult choice between silence and carefully chosen words. Every response carried significance beyond private grief, resonating in the public space. In the early hours, a family representative released a brief message, expressing deep sorrow while acknowledging the passing of Michelle and Rob Reiner, a statement marked by restraint amid uncertainty. The message conveyed profound grief over an unexpected loss, while respectfully requesting space during an intensely personal moment. This careful tone was consistent with how Rob and Michelle had long chosen to separate their private world from their public roles. In the days that followed, restraint remained the family's quiet shield, maintaining distance from public attention and allowing reflection to take place away from cameras. No relatives addressed the media directly, reinforcing a boundary that protected dignity and privacy amid widespread curiosity. Members of the extended family, including those connected through blended ties, chose to remain out of public view, stepping back from media attention during an intensely delicate period. Their decision reflected a desire for calm and dignity rather than exposure. At the same time, several well-known public figures offered words of reflection, speaking broadly about cultural influence and artistic legacy. Messages of respect from leaders across political life highlighted the impact of creative voices on society, expressing sympathy in a measured tone while honoring contributions to the arts and to the wider community. Within the entertainment world, colleagues and longtime companions have remembered Rob Reiner as a cherished presence and a towering creative voice, sharing both admiration and quiet grief over his absence. These reflections go beyond his achievements on screen, pointing to an influence that reached into shared values and collective thought. Rob Reiner was more than a filmmaker. He was a storyteller who shaped perspectives, using narrative to illuminate themes of humanity, connection, and meaning in ways that stayed with audiences long after the credits rolled. His name alone was never meant to provoke noise. Instead, every reaction, whether respect, admiration, or discussion, grew naturally from a legacy shaped by his work, his recognition, and the choices he carried across decades. Rob Reiner's path did not start beneath flashing lights or grand ceremonies, but quietly, through familiar television appearances that entered homes night after night. The early challenges he encountered became part of his foundation, strengthening his resolve rather than weakening his direction, and quietly preparing him for the influence he would later hold. In many ways, those early obstacles became the forces that refined Rob Reiner into a resilient and ever-curious creative mind. From familiar television appearances to confidently stepping behind the camera, he embraced growth through continual reinvention. Each transition reflected a willingness to challenge himself and explore new ground. It was this sustained commitment to learning and evolution that ultimately secured Rob Reiner's place as one of the most enduring and respected figures in cinematic history. Rob Reiner was born in 1,947 inches, the Bronx, New York, into a household already deeply connected to the world of entertainment. His father, Carl Reiner, was a respected writer and celebrated actor, while his mother, Estelle Reiner, later became memorable to audiences through her appearance in When Harry Met Sally. Art and performance were woven into everyday life, with live television sets forming part of his childhood environment. Growing up so close to the industry taught Rob early on the difference between opportunity and earned recognition. Surrounded by his father's well-known legacy, he learned to step out of a long shadow and began his own acting journey in the late 1960 seconds. After several modest appearances, his breakthrough came with the role of Michael Stivic on All in the Family, a performance that firmly connected Rob Reiner with American audiences throughout the 1970 seconds and brought him major recognition. The character became a symbol of a younger voice questioning established views, often labeled in a simplistic way that audiences quickly remembered. Rob later reflected that carrying this image for years was both a reward and a restraint, marking a time when achievement and limitation existed side by side. The series continued for 8 seasons, shaping a defining chapter of his early career. Even at the height of recognition, Rob began to sense invisible limits forming around him. In the early 1980 seconds, he stepped away from acting and gradually left television behind, opening the door to a decisive transition into directing. That choice would redefine the course of his professional life. His first project behind the camera, This Is Spinal Tap in 1984, was more than a creative experiment. It signaled a new voice and direction. The film resonated widely, earning a lasting place in popular culture and reshaping expectations of comedy. From that point on, Rob fully embraced his identity as a storyteller from behind the lens, followed by a succession of films that connected strongly with both audiences and critics alike. Stand By Me, The Princess Bride. When Harry Met Sally and Misery, each rooted in a different genre, shared a clear signature: storytelling that felt grounded, accessible, and emotionally precise. When Harry Met Sally came to be regarded as a defining romantic film, while Misery gained critical acclaim, including an Academy Award for Kathy Bates. Rob Reiner moved effortlessly across genres, leaving a distinct imprint on both popular entertainment and award-recognized cinema. Working alongside a close circle of skilled collaborators, he expanded his reach even further. One of his major projects achieved global success, earning hundreds of millions worldwide, multiple Oscar nominations, and uniting a cast of high-profile stars whose performances became deeply memorable. The famous line, "You can't handle the truth," quickly crossed beyond the screen and settled into popular culture as a lasting symbol. In 1991, Rob Reiner took another decisive step by founding Castle Rock Entertainment, a move that reflected his desire for greater creative direction and long-term vision. From a familiar television face, he had evolved into one of Hollywood's most influential figures. Yet, alongside achievement came mounting responsibility. For years, his schedule was filled without pause, one project flowing into the next. Those who worked with him recalled long nights spent refining details, moments when dedication quietly blurred the boundary between passion and personal rest. In one interview, Rob once explained, "I don't want to overlook a single detail," adding that losing control meant the story no longer truly belonged to him. Those words revealed a deep commitment to precision that followed him in every capacity, whether directing, producing, or shaping a script. Over time, this relentless pace began to ripple into his personal life. His first marriage came to an end in the late 1970s, and long stretches devoted to Castle Rock or distant film sets occasionally created gaps with his children. People close to him recall that work rarely stayed at the studio, often continuing at home late into the night, where creative debates lingered well past midnight. Those around him often noted that his energy seemed endless whenever conversation turned to cinema. Every effort he made was directed toward reaching the highest level of creative expression. By the early 1990s, Rob Reiner had arrived at a position achieved by very few, carrying both influence and a recognizable identity tied to films that balanced broad appeal with emotional depth. Over time, however, the cost of sustained success quietly surfaced. Beneath the polished image were lingering pressures and unresolved strains. Creative tensions within Castle Rock gradually emerged, with certain projects slowing due to differing visions and difficult decisions that Rob ultimately had to confront himself. If you're curious to explore the unseen challenges behind the spotlight and the defining choices Rob Reiner faced throughout his journey, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to follow the deeper stories behind his life and career. The achievements Rob Reiner reached throughout his career placed him among the most influential figures in the film world. Holding final authority over many projects meant carrying immense expectations at all times. Each accomplishment brought with it a growing weight of responsibility, especially within an industry that thrives on constant innovation, where even minor missteps could carry lasting consequences. For Rob, every choice, whether subtle or significant, had a direct impact not only on his own path, but also on the many creative lives connected to his decisions. Over time, this unrelenting pressure quietly accumulated, leading to deep fatigue that touched both mind and body. Success is widely admired, yet its hidden costs are rarely discussed or fully understood. By the close of 1992, as Rob reflected on a decade of rapid change, he could see not only the milestones he had reached, but also the emotional weight carried along the way. Across those 10 years, his abilities were affirmed through widely celebrated films, earning recognition from critics and audiences alike, while revealing the complex balance between achievement and personal endurance. Beneath the surface of success, Rob slowly came to understand that no spotlight remains fixed forever. As his career stood at its height, he began to confront shifts not only within the industry but also within himself. The journey was no longer guided solely by passion and artistic expression. As attention gradually shifted, he He faced the growing distance between personal creative control and the uncompromising logic of the marketplace. The industry demanded outcomes and returns, pressures that did not always move in harmony with a director's original vision. This growing tension quietly formed inner fractures, leaving him with the sense that control was slowly slipping away. As several close collaborators began to rise in their own paths, Rob Reiner moved into a phase of tighter oversight across his work. He often took on multiple responsibilities at once, guiding direction, production, and story development in parallel. Castle Rock Entertainment, the company he helped establish, evolved into a launch point for numerous film and television projects. By carrying several roles within a single production, Rob aimed to preserve consistency and creative integrity, believing that close involvement was the surest way to protect quality. Yet this approach also gave rise to tension. Some collaborators later described Rob as someone driven by exacting standards, often reluctant to settle for partial agreement. If a story failed to meet his expectations, progress could come to a halt. One industry insider recalled that a notable turning point emerged in the late 1990 seconds when differing creative views caused delays on two Castle Rock projects during post-production. While details were never openly discussed, reports at the time hinted at internal creative strain that affected scheduling decisions. Around this period, the 1994 film North, which Rob directed, received a challenging response from critics, marking a rare moment of public scrutiny in his career. Despite featuring a strong ensemble, the film struggled to connect with audiences and did not achieve commercial success, becoming a rare setback in Rob Reiner's long streak of accomplishments. For the first time, his work faced widespread criticism, signaling a noticeable shift in public perception. A well-known critic offered an unusually blunt assessment, highlighting the shock of seeing such a response directed at a filmmaker long celebrated for consistency. Rob chose not to engage publicly, instead stepping away from directing for nearly 3 years. When he returned with The Story of Us in 1999, the project likewise failed to leave a lasting impression, reinforcing a period of uncertainty in his career. Rob's portrayal of a long-term relationship was viewed by some as out of step with the changing tone of the era. Commentators felt the story lacked the sharp contrast and emotional edge audiences were beginning to expect, reading it as overly idealized for its time. Gradually, questions surfaced about whether Rob Reiner could adjust to the shifting sensibilities of a newer generation. Industry voices began placing his work alongside that of emerging filmmakers known for darker or more unconventional styles, suggesting a change in creative momentum. As professional recognition slowed, this period of uncertainty quietly extended into his personal life as well. His first marriage came to a quiet conclusion, drawing little attention at the time. Yet in the years that followed, particularly during the 2000s, his name began appearing in discussions centered on financial restructuring after separation, including questions surrounding shared assets and long-term planning. One legal publication observed that this phase required Rob to reassess the foundations of his personal finances from the ground up. Gradually, this shift marked a moment when a filmmaker once known for guarding his private world found himself mentioned more often in social commentary than in creative or cultural circles. Not long after, Rob Reiner married Michelle Singer, a former collaborator. The partnership appeared to bring renewed steadiness to his personal life, even as he chose to remain silent on questions involving his previous family ties. His boundaries with the media grew firmer, and public access to his private world became increasingly limited. Gradually, his image evolved. He was no longer viewed solely as a creator of emotionally resonant stories, but also as a decisive figure operating behind the scenes, occasionally stepping into broader civic conversations. For some audiences, this shift prompted distance not because of his films, but due to how his public presence had changed over time. During this phase, Rob Reiner became involved in several civic initiatives in California. including campaigns focused on education funding and public awareness. While his intentions were widely seen as constructive, his growing visibility in social and policy discussions gradually began to overshadow his identity as a filmmaker. At a public appearance in 2006, Rob remarked that personal approval was not his priority, emphasizing instead a commitment to principle. This stance revealed a readiness to accept disagreement, even as it quietly widened the distance between him and a portion of the audience that had once viewed him through a more neutral, artistic lens. Over time, Castle Rock gradually reduced its scope and no longer occupied the influential position it once held. Rob continued working behind the camera on more modest projects, though none matched the widespread impact of his early years. His presence never fully disappeared, but the intensity of public conversation around his name slowly softened. Within professional circles, Rob Reiner was still regarded with respect and recognition. In broader media narratives, however, he became harder to define, no longer seen solely as a filmmaker, but as a complex figure balancing creative work with social engagement and occasionally stirring debate beyond the world of cinema. Some observers suggested that Rob had drifted away from his sharp business sense, while others felt his focus on filmmaking was no longer as singular as it once had been. Though different in tone, both perspectives pointed toward the same underlying shift. The collective agreement that once surrounded his name in earlier peak years was no longer as unified. By 2010, Rob Reiner had not vanished from public life. He remained active, continued to appear, and stayed engaged, though no longer positioned at the center of attention. His career had not ended, but its rhythm had clearly changed. When his name surfaced in headlines, the conversation had moved away from upcoming projects and toward the ideas and viewpoints he chose to share. As creative work gradually moved out of the foreground, each personal remark began to carry broader social meaning. Rob Reiner stepped beyond the walls of the studio and into open public discussion, where his name became linked not only to cinema, but to a legacy increasingly examined through debated interpretations of culture and values. Ongoing disagreements followed, analyzed and revisited from multiple angles. Throughout the 2010 seconds, Rob Reiner appeared more often in public as a civic voice, taking part in organized efforts across California and lending his support to causes centered on education, public safety, and individual rights. His steady visibility in public discourse gradually led to a more divided perception of his image. Supporters saw him as direct and principled, while critics felt he had moved away from the distance many expect from creative figures. Rob never avoided disagreement. In a 2018 interview, he remarked that universal approval was not his aim, explaining that he chose to speak when guided by conviction. That statement circulated widely at the time, triggering extended discussion and reflection that continued across media platforms for weeks. The debates did not remain confined to public policy alone. Some of Rob's remarks shared online were perceived by portions of the audience as unusually forceful, prompting criticism and extended discussion. He chose not to soften or revise those views. Gradually, media coverage shifted, referencing his name more often in the context of social commentary than creative projects. With each new mention, attention moved away from upcoming films or artistic plans and toward his stance on unfolding public issues. Rather than stepping back, Rob continued to occupy space in public conversation, allowing his influence to evolve beyond the boundaries of cinema. He took part in conferences, added his name to numerous public initiatives, and appeared at civic forums alongside academics and policymakers. Throughout it all, he remained firm in the positions he believed mattered. Over time, these debates began to carry professional consequences. Some potential collaborators grew cautious about linking new projects to his name, and a number of independent studios chose to keep a respectful distance even while acknowledging his legacy. Rob rarely addressed this shift in public. Gradually, his presence became more reserved, and he withdrew further from the spotlight, choosing privacy over continued exposure. His marriage to Michelle Singer unfolded largely away from public attention, aside from occasional appearances at local or community gatherings. Michelle continued her work as an independent producer, maintaining a low profile and rarely engaging with media interviews. Together, they chose a lifestyle intentionally distanced from constant public exposure. Rob's children also remained mostly out of view, pursuing paths outside the entertainment industry and seldom speaking publicly about their father. While a few sources noted that he stayed in touch with them, details were kept private. Creatively, Rob reduced his output, producing and directing fewer projects, yet he never fully stepped away from his work in film. He turned his attention to more modest productions, projects that drew less attention, influenced by limited distribution and a gradual shift in public fascination. Rob made no attempt to reclaim earlier heights of fame. Instead, his focus moved toward stories centered on community, conscience, and fundamental human values. These works were no longer designed for mass commercial appeal like those from his peak years, but reflected a quieter intent. When news of his passing emerged, his legacy was immediately re-examined from many perspectives, inviting reflection on both his creative journey and the broader impact he left behind. Film analysis platforms began re-examining his body of work, while outlets focused on public affairs revisited the statements he had made over the final 15 years of his life. For many viewers, he remained closely associated with films such as Stand By Me, Misery, and When Harry Met Sally, while commentators from other fields emphasized his more debated public presence. His image no longer fit into a single definition, instead forming a mosaic of contrasting perspectives. He was remembered as a gifted filmmaker and, at the same time, as someone known for firm principles and limited compromise. A remark once shared by a former Castle Rock colleague captured this complexity and was soon echoed across numerous cultural tributes. From a media standpoint, Rob's professional path unfolded as a chain of interconnected chapters. His drive to build a self-sustaining creative environment, the tensions that arose from artistic collaboration, and his outspoken social positions all combined to form a layered public portrait. Rob Reiner's passing was not simply the conclusion of a personal story. It became a moment that prompted broader reflection on a figure who shaped a portion of America's cinematic memory. His name is no longer spoken in a single voice or tone. Perhaps that complexity was something he came to accept. For many observers, Rob Reiner is less a template to imitate than a subject to examine and understand. Despite the heights he reached, Rob Reiner demonstrated that a creative individual can shape their own identity and walk a chosen path without retreat. He was more than a filmmaker. He acted in alignment with personal conviction, accepted friction as part of the journey, and left behind a legacy that resists simple labels. Throughout his life, Rob confronted the weight of his choices head-on, absorbing the pressures that came from both the industry's demands and the expectations of those around him. He was an artist not only through the films he created, but through the way he chose to work, think, and live. The legacy Rob Reiner left behind cannot be reduced to a single label or neatly defined category. It reflects a rare combination of creative instinct, the freedom to speak and express without restraint, and the resolve to remain steady in an industry shaped by constant change. Rob never fit comfortably into one frame, because his life and career represented a broader sense of complexity, individuality, and artistic depth. It became a portrait shaped by layered contrasts, creator, producer, civic voice, and public figure intertwined into a single, complex narrative. As official records gradually move toward closure, what endures is how Rob Reiner left the audience with reflection rather than certainty, prompting more questions than conclusions. His imprint remains woven into the fabric of film history. Leave a 1-inch in the comments if you feel a sense of empathy for Rob Reiner, or a 0 if you see the story differently. Remember to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next revealing chapter.